In the midst of chaos, there exists a philosophy that can turn death into a tool. Oda Nobunaga, feared warlord and ruthless tactician, was more than just a military leader. His mind, shaped by the wisdom of Zen, crafted strategies that transcended battlefields, bending the very nature of life and death to his will. What drove him to defy the very traditions of his time, and what ancient wisdom did he wield to carve his name into history? The Sengoku period in Japan was an age of constant warfare, a time when samurai adhered to the Bushido code, a strict code of honor, duty, and loyalty. But Oda Nobunaga, one of the most significant figures in this turbulent era, wasn't content with simply following these norms. Beneath his brutal conquests and unyielding ambition lay a philosophy, deeply rooted in Zen, that would shape not just his approach to war, but his very understanding of life and death itself. In this documentary, we unravel the hidden teachings of Oda Nobunaga. Far from the image of a mere warlord, Nobunaga's actions were driven by a profound and complex worldview. It was his Zen-inspired outlook on war, leadership, and mortality that made him one of Japan's most enigmatic and influential figures. To understand him is to understand the delicate balance between spirituality and violence in a world at the edge of chaos. What does it take for a man to stand alone against the tides of time, tradition, and even his own death? Oda Nobunaga's rise to power was not just about military might or political cunning. His success was rooted in a philosophy that few truly understood, and fewer still dared to challenge. In an age where samurai followed the ancient path of loyalty and sacrifice, Nobunaga's rebellion against these ideals was both a break from the past and a harbinger of the future. But how did these radical ideas shape his legacy? And what did they reveal about the true nature of leadership in an age defined by bloodshed? To understand Oda Nobunaga's philosophy, one must first understand the context of the Sengoku period, the environment in which he rose to power. This was a time of great political instability, where Japan was divided into many warring factions, each ruled by a daimyo, feudal lord, fighting for supremacy. The central authority of the imperial family had all but dissolved, and warlords sought to consolidate power by any means necessary. In such a brutal and chaotic environment, only the most innovative and unyielding individuals could rise to the top. Nobunaga was one of these rare figures. At the heart of Nobunaga's rise to power was a radical departure from the traditional ideals of the samurai. The samurai class had long adhered to the Bushido code, a strict set of principles that valued loyalty, honor, and personal sacrifice. This code was as much about spiritual self-discipline as it was about martial skill, and it was passed down through generations. However, Nobunaga saw Bushido as a limiting and outdated philosophy. While he did not discard all aspects of the samurai code, his view of life, death, and war was profoundly different from the conventional understanding. Nobunaga's Zen-inspired philosophy was based on a deep understanding of the impermanence of life. In Zen Buddhism, practitioners are taught to meditate on the transient nature of existence, to recognize that all things, whether people, possessions, or experiences, are fleeting. This awareness of impermanence encouraged a focus on the present moment, unburdened by attachments to the past or future. Nobunaga's approach to leadership and war was shaped by this very idea. He did not cling to old customs or ideals simply because they were traditional. Instead, he believed in adapting to the realities of the present and seizing opportunities for the future. Nobunaga's embrace of Zen Buddhism was not a superficial or ceremonial matter. It was a transformative force that shaped his entire worldview, including his views on power, war, and death. Zen emphasized detachment from worldly desires, from the fear of death, and from emotional attachment to outcomes. This spiritual practice allowed Nobunaga to see the world more clearly and make decisions without the emotional weight that burdened his contemporaries. Where other leaders might hesitate due to fear of loss, shame, or failure, Nobunaga acted decisively as he understood that everything, including his own life, was impermanent. One of the clearest manifestations of Nobunaga's Zen philosophy can be seen in his military tactics. In a time when traditional samurai warfare was dominated by swords, spears, and cavalry, Nobunaga was one of the first to adopt firearms. Firearms were considered crude and dishonorable by many in the samurai class, who favored the elegance and discipline of the sword. However, Nobunaga saw firearms for what they were, a powerful tool that could dramatically shift the balance of power in his favor. His willingness to adopt firearms, specifically the arquebus, a type of matchlock gun, was a revolutionary act that transformed the nature of warfare in Japan. At the Battle of Nagashino in 1575, Nobunaga demonstrated the military genius that stemmed from his Zen-inspired philosophy. Nobunaga's forces, armed with firearms, decisively defeated the Takeda clan's famed cavalry, long considered one of the best in Japan. Nobunaga deployed his arquebuses in a highly organized formation, creating a wall of fire that cut down the Takeda horsemen as they charged. This battle was a stark demonstration of his belief that tradition must not stand in the way of progress. While the Takeda relied on centuries-old cavalry tactics, Nobunaga's use of firearms rendered these methods obsolete. His willingness to embrace technology, to detach from tradition and use the most effective means available, was a direct application of Zen's emphasis on non-attachment and adaptation to reality. The significance of the Battle of Nagashino goes beyond just the tactical victory. It was emblematic of Nobunaga's philosophical outlook. Nobunaga didn't see war through the lens of honor, glory, or personal gain. Instead, he saw it as a tool for achieving his ultimate goal, the unification of Japan. He was willing to abandon whatever methods were deemed sacred or traditional if they proved to be less effective. His use of firearms was not just an act of military innovation, but a manifestation of his belief that the impermanence of life and the chaos of war meant that only those who adapted would survive. He did not hesitate to use every resource at his disposal, regardless of its source or its place in the samurai tradition. Another key aspect of Nobunaga's philosophy was his treatment of death. The samurai were often taught that death was an integral part of life, a concept deeply embedded in the Bushido code. For them, death in battle was a noble sacrifice. Nobunaga, however, approached death from a different perspective. For him, death was not something to be revered or feared. It was simply a part of the world's impermanence. This acceptance of mortality gave him a unique ability to make decisions that others might have found difficult or even unthinkable. Nobunaga's relationship with death was also expressed through his treatment of those who opposed him. Unlike many of his contemporaries, who viewed enemies with a sense of honor or respect, Nobunaga viewed his enemies as obstacles to be removed. He did not hesitate to destroy anyone who stood in his way, whether they were warriors, religious figures, or entire villages. His sacking of Buddhist monasteries, such as Enryaku-ji, is a prime example of this. Enryaku-ji, one of the most powerful and influential religious institutions in Japan at the time, had long been a source of political power. The monks at the monastery often held political sway and were not hesitant to use their influence to challenge Nobunaga's rule. In a bold and brutal move, Nobunaga ordered the destruction of the monastery. This was not simply a military action. It was a symbolic act that conveyed his belief that no one, not even religious institutions, was above his authority. Nobunaga's destruction of Enryaku-ji shocked the nation, and it was a defining moment in his career. Nobunaga's actions were not born out of malice, but from his Zen-inspired understanding of the world's transience. In the Zen worldview, attachments to anything, whether it be people, places, or beliefs, are a source of suffering. Nobunaga's willingness to sever these attachments, even if it meant destroying sacred institutions, was a reflection of his pragmatic view of the world. He understood that to achieve his goals and unite Japan, he could not allow old loyalties or traditions to dictate his actions. He embraced the chaos and unpredictability of life, and in doing so, he redefined what it meant to be a leader. Nobunaga's relationship with death reached its most dramatic expression during the Honnoji incident. In 1582, Nobunaga was betrayed by his trusted general Akechi Mitsuhide, who led an uprising against him. Surrounded by enemy forces, Nobunaga chose to end his life rather than face capture. This final act of death was not a defeat for Nobunaga. It was the ultimate expression of his Zen philosophy. He accepted death as a part of life, without fear, without resistance. In many ways, Nobunaga's death was the culmination of everything he had believed, that all things, including life and death, are impermanent, and it is only through acceptance of this impermanence that one can achieve true freedom. Oda Nobunaga's life and philosophy changed the trajectory of Japanese history. His revolutionary tactics, coupled with his Zen-inspired worldview, reshaped the way leaders would approach war, power, and death. While his death was tragic, it underscored his unwavering adherence to his beliefs, especially in his acceptance of mortality. It was a fitting end for a man whose entire life had been defined by a deep understanding of impermanence. Oda Nobunaga's legacy is not simply one of military conquest. His life was a testament to the power of philosophy in shaping history. Through Zen Buddhism, he viewed life and death with an uncommon clarity, allowing him to make decisions that others would find impossible. His disregard for traditional samurai values, his embrace of technology, and his ruthless approach to power set him apart from his contemporaries and made him a visionary. Nobunaga did not just conquer Japan, he transformed it. And though he died before seeing the full realization of his goals, his influence is still felt today. Nobunaga's Zen philosophy was the key to his success, and it remains a profound example of how deeply spiritual ideas can shape the course of history. To delve deeper into the philosophies that shapes history and learn more about the figures who redefined the world, subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content.